kids. I am so excited that today we get to read a story together that's called Enemy Pie. Can you read that? Ready? Enemy Pie. You got it. This is a story about a little boy who has an enemy. That means someone he doesn't like. He has an enemy that he tries to get rid of by feeding him pie, and we'll find out if it works or not in just a minute. But first, I want to introduce you to two of my friendship bugs. My friendship bugs teach us how to be good friends, but my first friendship bug is actually not a very good example of that. His name is Excluder. Can you say excluder? Ready? Excluder. Yeah, excluder is my friendship bug who excludes the other bugs. He leaves them out. He doesn't let them participate. So for instance, if he were on the playground and he were going down the slide and another bug came and said, "Hey, can I go down the slide too?" Excluder would say, "No, go play someplace else," even though there's enough room for both of them on the slide. If he were playing a game with his friends on the playground and a new bug came and said, "Can I play the game too?" Excluder would say, "No, you can't play with us." Can you say it like him? Ready? "No, you can't play with us." If he were in the lunchroom and there were an empty seat next to him and somebody said, "Can I sit next to you?" he would say, "No, go sit somewhere else," even though the bugs are allowed to sit wherever they want in the lunchroom. If he were in the classroom and a bug came and stood by him in line, Excluder would kind of turn his body to not make room for the other bug, to push the other bug out of the way, because he doesn't want to let anyone play anything with him. He excludes them and leaves them out. And for that reason, he doesn't actually have a lot of friends. So now I want to introduce you to the opposite of excluder, the friendship bug that all the bugs love. Her name is Includer. Can you say that? Includer. Yeah, Includer is my friendship bug who loves to play with the other bugs. If she's going down the slide and someone says, "Hey, can I go down the slide too?" she says, "Sure, let's do it together." If she's playing a game with the other bugs on the playground and a new bug comes along and says, "Can I play too?" Includer will say, "Yeah, you can play too." Can you say that like her? Ready? "Yeah, you can play too." If there's an empty seat next to her in the lunchroom and somebody says, "Can I sit next to you?" even if Includer doesn't know who that bug is, she will still say, "Sure, you can sit here." And she might even say, "What's your name?" and try to make friends with the new bug. In the classroom, if somebody comes and stands next to her in line and she doesn't know that bug, it doesn't even matter. She will still turn her body to make room for the bug to stand next to her. She always includes the other bugs. She lets them play. She lets them be a part of what she's doing. She tries to be friendly. And that's why all the other bugs love to play with Includer. She is very kind. Okay, so we're going to read Enemy Pie. And I want you to notice in this story, there's an example of a boy who's an excluder, who leaves someone out, and an includer, who lets someone play. And let's find out what happens to these two boys as they act like an includer and an excluder. Watch for those. It should have been a perfect summer. My dad helped me build a treehouse in our backyard. My sister was at camp for 3 whole weeks, and I was on the best baseball team in town. It should have been a perfect summer, but it wasn't. Uh-oh. He's about to tell us why it wasn't a perfect summer. Can you make a disappointed face like him and say, "But it wasn't"? Ready? But it wasn't. Good. Let's find out why. It was all good until Jeremy Ross moved into the neighborhood, right next door to my best friend Stanley. I did not like Jeremy Ross. He laughed at me when he struck me out in a baseball game. He had a party on his trampoline, and I wasn't even invited. And did you hear that? If Jeremy Ross had a party on his trampoline and he invited lots of other kids but not him, he was being an excluder. Did you know it? Let's say it. He was being an excluder. Yeah, he was leaving him out. I wasn't even invited, but my best friend Stanley was. Jeremy Ross was the one and only person on my enemy list. I never even had an enemy list until he moved into the neighborhood, but as soon as he came along, I needed one. I hung it up in my treehouse where Jeremy Ross was not allowed to go. And you can see he's hung this sign here, and it says, enemy number 1, Jeremy Ross. Can you say that starting enemy number 1? Ready? Enemy number 1, Jeremy Ross. You got it. That means he's the number 1 person I don't like. And why? Because he excludes him. Dad understood stuff like enemies. He told me that when he was my age, he had enemies too, but he knew a way to get rid of them. I asked him to tell me how. Tell you how? I'll show you how, he said. He pulled a really old recipe book off the kitchen shelf. Inside, there was a worn-out scrap of paper with faded writing. Dad held it up and squinted at it. If you squint, it means you're kind of looking at it like you're trying to read the writing that's there. Can you hold up a recipe and kind of squint at it? Like you're trying to read it? Good. Enemy pie, he said, satisfied. That means after he squints at it, he realizes this is the recipe he's looking for, so he squints and goes, enemy pie. Can you do that with me? Look at it. Ready? Enemy pie. You got it. You may be wondering what exactly is in enemy pie. I was wondering too, but Dad said the recipe was so secret he couldn't even tell me. I decided it must be magic. I begged him to tell me something, anything. I will tell you this, he said. Enemy pie is the fastest known way to get rid of enemies. Now, of course, this got my mind working. What kinds of things, disgusting things, would I put into a pie for an enemy? I brought Dad some weeds from the garden, but he just shook his head. I brought him earthworms and rocks, but he didn't think he'd need those. I gave him the gum I'd been chewing all morning. He gave it right back to me. So it's enemy pie. It's pie that you give to your enemies, but it doesn't have worms or rocks or old gum in it. I wonder what it will have in it. I went out to play alone. Which is kind of sad because that's what excluding does. It means that there's always somebody left out, left alone. I went out to play alone. I shot baskets until the ball got stuck on the roof. I threw a boomerang that never came back to me. A boomerang is a toy that's kind of shaped like a triangle, and when you throw it, if you throw it just right, it will come right back to you. I threw a boomerang that never came back to me. And all the while, I listened to the sounds of my dad chopping and stirring and blending the ingredients of enemy pie. This could be a great summer after all. Enemy pie was going to be awful. I tried to imagine how horrible it must smell, or worse yet, what it would look like. But when I was in the backyard looking for ladybugs, I smelled something really, really, really good. And as far as I could tell, it was coming from our kitchen. I was a bit confused. I wonder if you could pretend you smell something really good and then look confused, like, but then be confused, like, why do I smell something good? Okay, pretend you smell something good. Ready? But we're confused about why would that be coming from our kitchen? Good. I went in to ask Dad what was wrong. Enemy pie shouldn't smell this good. But Dad was smart. If enemy pie smelled bad, your enemy would never eat it, he said. I could tell he'd made enemy pie before, because of course that's true. If somebody smells it and it smells bad, they're not going to take a bite. The buzzer rang and Dad put on the oven mitts and pulled the pie out of the oven. It looked like plain old pie. It looked good enough to eat. I was catching on. But still, I wasn't really sure how this enemy pie worked. What exactly did it do to enemies? Maybe it made their hair fall out? Or their breath stinky? Maybe it made bullies cry? I asked Dad, but he was no help. He wouldn't tell me a thing. But while the pie cooled, he He filled me in on my job. So it looks like he's going to have to do something in order for it to work. He talked quietly. There is one part of enemy pie that I can't do. In order for it to work, you need to spend a day with your enemy. Even worse, you have to be nice to him. It's not easy, but that's the only way that enemy pie can work. Are you sure you want to go through with this? Of course I was. It sounded horrible. It was scary, but it was worth a try. So he's actually being really brave because he realizes, if I have to spend a whole day with my enemy, that sounds really scary. I don't want to spend a whole day with somebody who's been leaving me out. But he said it was worth a try. I wonder, can you pretend you're being really brave and say, but it was worth a try? Ready? But it was worth a try. Good. All I had to do was spend one day with Jeremy Ross. Then he'd be out of my hair for the rest of my life. I rode my bike to his house and knocked on the door. I wonder what will happen. When Jeremy opened the door, he seemed surprised. Can you make a surprised face? Ready? Good. He stood on the other side of the screen door and looked at me, waiting for me to say something. I was nervous. Can you play? I asked. Can you do it like you're nervous but still ask, can you play? Ready? Can you play? Good. He looked confused. I'll go ask my mom, he said. He came back with his shoes in his hand. His mom walked around the corner to say hello. You boys stay out of trouble, she said, smiling. So I think I just realized what's happening. His dad said you have to spend a day playing with your enemy. So what he's doing now is being an includer. Can you say it? He's being an includer. Because even though Jeremy Ross is his enemy, he's going to include him and ask him to play. Oh, wow. This will be interesting. We rode bikes for a while and played on the trampoline. Then we made some water balloons and threw them at the neighbor girls, but we missed. Jeremy's mom made us lunch. After lunch, we went over to my house. And do you notice they're both smiling like they're having fun? It was strange, but I was kind of having fun with my enemy. He almost seemed nice, but of course I couldn't tell Dad that since he had worked so hard to make this enemy pie. Jeremy Ross liked my basketball hoop. He said he wished he had a basketball hoop, but they didn't have room for one. I let him win a game just to be nice. Wow, so they're eating lunch together, they threw water balloons together, they played basketball, where he even let Jeremy Ross win a game? Wow, they actually seem like they're becoming friends. Jeremy Ross knew how to throw a boomerang. He threw it and it came right back to him. I threw it and it went over my house and into the backyard. When we climbed over the fence to find it, the first thing Jeremy noticed was my tree house. Wait a minute, and isn't that where the note is hanging that says Jeremy Ross is enemy number 1? My tree house was my tree house. I was the boss. If my sister wanted in, I didn't have to let her. If my dad wanted in, I didn't have to let him. And if Jeremy wanted in, can we go in it, he asked. Ooh, what do you think he should say? Should he take Jeremy Ross in his treehouse, or should he say, no, it's still just mine? What do you think? Okay, some kids say no, but a lot of kids say, yeah, take him up there. Can we go in it, he asked. I knew he was going to ask me that, but he was the top person, the only person on my enemy list, and enemies aren't allowed in my treehouse. But he did teach me how to throw a boomerang, and he did have me over for lunch, and he did let me play on his trampoline. He wasn't being a very good enemy. Okay, I said, but hold on. So he is going to let him in his treehouse. I climbed up ahead of him and tore the enemy list off the wall. Can you see it's crumpled in the corner? He took it down so Jeremy Ross wouldn't see it. I had a checkerboard and some cards in the treehouse, and we played games until my dad called us down for dinner. We pretended we didn't hear him, and when he came out to get us, we tried to hide from him, but somehow he found us. You can see the dad down there saying, "Come down for dinner." Can you say that? Ready? Come down for dinner. You got it. Dad made us macaroni and cheese for dinner. My favorite. It was Jeremy's favorite too. Maybe Jeremy Ross wasn't so bad after all. I was beginning to think that maybe we should just forget about enemy pie. But sure enough, after dinner, Dad brought out the pie. I watched as he cut the pie into 8 thick slices. "Dad," I said, "it sure is nice having a new friend in the neighborhood." I was trying to get his attention and trying to tell him that Jeremy Ross was no longer my enemy. But Dad only smiled and nodded. I think he thought I was just pretending. Oh no, he's trying to get the message to his dad. Jeremy's now my friend, but his dad's not really understanding. Dad dished up 3 plates side by side with big pieces of pie and giant scoops of ice cream. He passed 1 to me and 1 to Jeremy. "Wow," Jeremy said, looking at the pie. "My dad never makes pies like this." It was at this point that I panicked. I didn't want Jeremy to eat enemy pie. He was my friend. I couldn't let him eat it. "Jeremy, don't eat it. It's bad pie. I think it's poisonous or something." Jeremy's fork stopped before reaching his mouth. He crumpled his eyebrows and looked at me funny. I felt relieved. I had saved his life. I was a hero. I wonder, could you do it like Jeremy? Pretend you're about to take a bite and he tells you to stop. So you stop halfway there and you have a confused look on your face. Ready? Start to take a bite. "Stop, stop." Good. And he thinks, "I'm a hero. I saved him from eating the poisonous pie." "If it's so bad," Jeremy asked, "then why has your dad already eaten half of it?" I turned to look at my dad. Sure enough, he was eating enemy pie. In fact, he has eaten so much of it that it's all over his mouth. "Good stuff," he mumbled through a mouthful. Can you pretend your mouth is full of pie and say good stuff? Ready? "Good stuff." You got it. And that was all he said. I sat there watching them eat enemy pie for a few seconds. Dad was laughing. Jeremy was happily eating. And neither of them was losing any hair. It seemed safe enough, so I took a tiny taste. Enemy pie was delicious. Ooh, I wonder if you could say that like him, like you really loved it, and say, "Enemy pie was delicious." Ready? Enemy pie was delicious. Good. After dessert, Jeremy rode his bike home, but not before inviting me over to play on his trampoline in the morning. He said he'd teach me how to flip. As for enemy pie, I still don't know how to make it. I still wonder if enemies really do hate it, or if their hair falls out, or their breath turns bad. But I don't know if I'll ever get an answer, because I just lost my best enemy. Ha! Did you hear that? I just lost my best enemy. Can you say that? Ready? I just lost my best enemy. You got it. And I think I know what happened. I think I know how it happened. I think when he decided to be an includer and to start inviting Jeremy Ross to play with him and do things with him, I think they both realized, hey, we don't have to be enemies. We can be friends. That's what happens when you decide to be an includer. So before you go, I wonder, here's my includer. Could you say a whole sentence and say, making friends means being an includer? Ready? Making friends means being an includer. You got it. Not an excluder. Good listening today. Okay, see you next time. Bye.